During the late 90s and early 2000s, cable internet became increasingly popular, replacing the slow and noisy dial-up. With the faster broadband connection being more common, game developers started to move towards the many possibilities of the brand new realm of online gaming. Online shooter games proved to be particularly popular, with PC games such as Quake, Half-Life and Counter-Strike becoming huge successes. The genre kept growing in popularity together with online gaming, and consoles didn't feel like staying behind. On the Xbox, Halo was made to be the king of online games, and on PlayStation 2, it was SOCOM. SOCOM, US Navy SEALs, was the first entry of the third-person tactical shooter series that would sell over 10 million copies in total on the PlayStation 2. The game features offline missions that can be done in 3 difficulties, and 10 online maps with 3 different game modes: Suppression, which is Team Deathmatch, Demolition, which is Bomb Defusal, and Extraction, which is Hostage Rescue. This is the foundation for the games that would come next, but it's nothing too special when looking back. It feels weird to play it after you know how the series evolved. The UI is simple but doesn't look too good, some of the color choices are weird, and for the most part all the basics of the series such as the online game modes and the team communication options are already there. The view distance is incredibly short in this game, and for that reason a lot of the levels try to hide that from the player by implementing fog and using darker night skies. In the second Congo level, however, this issue becomes clear as snipers will dome you before you and your team can even see them. This series always had some issues with the squad mates AI, but the first SOCOM feels like one of the worst ones. Sure, much like the enemy AI, they can see what you can't, and down targets outside of your view distance. But they also tend to get stuck when pathing to designated locations, and seem to lack common sense that you would expect even from someone who has not been trained for military operations. Explosives bad, Spectre. How the hell did you become the team leader?
Why are we still here? Just to suffer?
Instead of the traditional number-based health bars that most games use, in SOCOM, each squad member has 5 hit points. Green's full health, orange slightly hurt, yellow's danger, red's critically hurt, and black means they are dead. This makes this game the deadliest one among SOCOM games, because if a terrorist even looks at you the wrong way and sprays his AK on you, you will be dead faster than you can react most times. This is a way that the game pushes players towards more patient, stealthy playstyles, to try to remain relatively realistic to how SEALs operate. But there is definitely some jank attached to this. As I mentioned before, the game's missions mostly take place during nighttime. While the reason is probably due to the fact that SEAL operations mostly take place during nights, the game gets a little too dark and the contrast is really low, so it can be hard sometimes to spot enemies from afar. Combine that with the low view distance and the fact that the AI can spot you from beyond that, and you got yourself a formula for an unintentionally hard stealth game. On the online side of things, which unfortunately I was not able to capture footage of any of these SOCOM games, the first SOCOM is also extremely bare bones when looking back at it. It was good for its time, but it quickly became obsolete with the release of SOCOM 2, which is by far the best game in the series, simple as that. It improves every single aspect of the first SOCOM and is overall a lot more fun to play. The view distance problem is mostly fixed. The maps are not as foggy and dark as before. The contrast was improved. The UI looks much cleaner. The online play was improved. The new maps are better, and while not perfect, the team's AI was mostly improved. The areas of operation this time are more interesting and diverse than in the first game. This time, a lot of the missions take place in urban areas, which I personally find more interesting than the forests and the deserts. Now, if there's one thing that always bothered me about SOCOM 2 is that while I never had high expectations for the voice acting in games in the early 2000s, the choices for foreign languages voice actors are interesting.
Roubo nas Forças Armadas Revolucionárias? Deserção? Você é insignificante!
Yeah, I don't know what happened here, but this is definitely one of the worst attempts at Brazilian Portuguese that I've ever seen. The best way to explain this is, imagine if the American Navy SEALs were dubbed by New Zealanders, Australians, Indians, and some Dutch guys who don't even speak English because the language seems close enough, so I guess it just works, right? This time the game implements more unlockables for clearing the campaign and different difficulties. In the first one, the only real incentive was unlocking terrorist guns. But now, not only you get terrorist guns, you also get weapons used by the SAS and the Spetsnaz as allied squads during the campaign, special weapons such as the OICW, and different playable characters for the multiplayer. Speaking of multiplayer, SOCOM 2's multiplayer was the fan favorite and probably the best multiplayer experience in the series. While there are merits to the other game's multiplayer modes, SOCOM 2 is most likely what most people think about when talking about SOCOM multiplayer. This game has both the original SOCOM maps and the new maps, which are overall an improvement design-wise over the first ones, with Crossroads being easily one of the most iconic multiplayer maps of the 2000s. After SOCOM 2, Zipper Interactive tried to get a little more creative with their map designs by making them larger and introducing vehicles to display the new possibilities of making larger multiplayer games on the PlayStation 2. But aside from being great tech demos for Sony, a lot of these maps missed the mark and didn't feel as fun to play in. SOCOM 2 to this day is the avatar of SOCOM and the game that fans attempt to revive in multiple ways. In SOCOM 3, like mentioned before, Zipper Interactive began their attempt to push the PlayStation 2 to the limit, by implementing larger and more complex maps not only for the multiplayer but also for the campaign. This is not without drawbacks, however, as SOCOM 3 clearly suffers from frame rate issues in some maps, and while there were some graphical improvements over the last game, they are not as big as they could be, as the large-scale maps already take a heavy toll on the PlayStation 2. The UI was changed and some aspects are improved and others not so much. In this game, players can give quick commands to their squad mates based on what they are aiming at. This allows players to quickly tell teammates to move to certain places or open doors without opening the communication menu. But this functionality is still in a primitive state, as sometimes it gives the wrong commands and you still are unable to tell teammates to open fire on the target that you're aiming at, which is an incredibly important command. The AI somehow got worse, and I don't know if it's related to the larger scale maps causing pathing issues or the lack of development focus on this aspect of the game. But what I can tell is that in this game you will see things unlike any of the previous SOCOM games. Both the teammates and the enemies are a lot stupider than before, and this can both make the game easier and harder. Easier because the enemies got 6 degrees of myopia since the last time around, and harder because your Humvee flipped over and fell over a small hill, and while you came out intact, your squad mates suffer severe brain hematomas. The mission briefing was changed to now display the team inside whatever vehicle is taken then to the area of operation, and you even get to listen to a fictional news report of the situation of the country that you're in, and you get to understand the impact that your missions have. which I find pretty cool. While Act 1 takes a little too long, it is a great conclusion to the Algeria Act in SOCOM 2, and the Poland Act is easily one of my favorite acts in the series. The map designs are really cool and I absolutely love the Night Stalker mission. While SOCOM 3 definitely felt like an overall downgrade from SOCOM 2, it is still a great game and probably my second favorite in the series. However, it is at this point that it becomes noticeable that the series suffered from feeling overall samey, and this would be further reinforced in SOCOM Combined Assault, which came out 1 year after SOCOM 3, and for the most part the game felt like a carbon copy of SOCOM 3 with a paint job thrown on top of it. The most relevant improvement over the third installment of the series was in the communication options with more quick commands, such as finally being able to tell your team to shoot a target that you're aiming at. While giving commands became substantially easier in Combined Assault, the AI somehow got worse, which counterbalanced the communication improvements. The game still suffered from frame rate issues due to the overly ambitious maps, but at least this time Zipper tried to make the bigger maps a bit more interesting, with more ways to approach objectives, more extra objectives, and intel to find around. The game had a more narrative-heavy campaign this time that didn't really work all that well. The campaign is entirely set within a fictional country that is an amalgamation of Afghanistan and Pakistan, situated near the two countries and not so cleverly named Tajikistan. Seriously, it sounds like the devs just said, let's make a country that is adjacent to Afghanistan and Pakistan. What should we name it? Tajikistan? You're a genius, Tom. The missions are overall not that interesting. I always remember the one with the stealth Humvee and the stadium one, but other than that, most of the missions were really bland and forgettable. Also, this is where the mainline console games started to do tie-ins with the Fireteam Bravo PSP games, which meant that if you never played those, you would miss out on a lot of the things that the game just expects you to know. Combined Assault also included the SOCOM version of Rainbow Six Terrorist Hunt, which was decent but not as fun to play as the Rainbow Six game mode. Overall, the single-player aspect in Combined Assault wasn't as fun or memorable as 2 or 3. Combined Assault multiplayer included SOCOM 3 maps, making it so there was no point logging in on SOCOM 3 anymore. But funnily enough, most lobbies ignored the Combined Assault maps as they weren't fun to play in. At the end of the day, a lot of players still prefer to go back to SOCOM 2. SOCOM Combined Assault was a decent but uneventful game to end the PlayStation 2 era. With the release of the PlayStation 3, the PlayStation 2 era was officially over, and it was time for Zipper Interactive to move on to new projects. As the tech demo kids of Sony, and due to their experience with massive maps and 32-player lobbies in the SOCOM games, they were tasked with developing a console game larger than any game before. That game ended up being MAG, a first-person shooter that didn't bring anything interesting to the table besides the 256-player lobbies. While Zipper was busy working on MAG, Sony designated Slant 6 Games to work on the next SOCOM game, Confrontation. Confrontation was the first multiplayer-only SOCOM game, and it came out with only 7 maps, a lot of technical issues, bugs, and was extremely laggy. A lot of the issues were eventually fixed, but Confrontation was a disappointment for many fans of the series that didn't consider it a proper SOCOM experience. The series wouldn't see another main console game until 2011, when SOCOM 4 was released, and that was a disaster. As the usual guinea pigs for Sony, Zipper Interactive developed SOCOM 4 with PlayStation Move in mind. The Sony attempt at trying to make their own motion controller after the success of the Wii that was somehow more forgettable and less successful than the already unsuccessful and forgettable Microsoft Kinect. The game, much like Combined Assault, tried to be more narrative heavy, but somehow got even worse. It isn't even about a Navy SEAL team anymore. It is a NATO squad with one Navy SEAL as the commander. It just doesn't make any sense. The multiplayer was forgettable and tried to push a DLC called SOCOM Pro, in which players would pay to get rewards over time with each update and an exclusive queue. Yeah, I don't know what they were thinking. Just 1 year after the release of SOCOM 4, Zipper Interactive was closed. With Zipper dismantled, all the PSU and PSP online services were shut down. 2 years later, both Confrontations and SOCOM 4 servers were also shut down, and that was the last that we ever heard of the SOCOM series. From the start, Zipper Interactive and SOCOM were to Sony only disposable guinea pigs. SOCOM stuck around for a long time because it was successful, but the series' purpose since the beginning was to test the possibilities and advancements in the development of console games. First to test out the PlayStation 2 multiplayer capabilities, then to test out large-scale multiplayer on the system, and eventually to test ways to incorporate new console-related hardware into games. Also, for all that Sony cared, it could be a game about purple aliens swimming in lava. It only took a tactical shooter aspect because the US Navy was willing to endorse the series as a test of a new recruitment propaganda method, way ahead of the army. The first game makes this much clearer, even including a full 20 minutes documentary about the Navy SEALs. So, considering that by the time that the series was declared dead, it had been on a streak of failures, it is no surprise that Sony wouldn't even flinch while axing it. Also, as someone who absolutely loved SOCOM 2 and spent a lot of time playing it online, nearly reaching Colonel 3 times, getting my rank reset by some asshole with a code breaker 2 times and just getting bored on the 3rd time, I must confess that SOCOM didn't stand the test of time. It didn't bring anything unique to the table other than the PlayStation Online play experience during its early years. The multiplayer was basically Counter-Strike, but on console and in third person. The single player was a simplified third-person adaptation of Rainbow Six. When it came out, if you had access to other consoles or a good PC, you were probably better off playing Counter-Strike or Halo for a better online experience. While other game series evolved over the years, SOCOM remained mostly the same, becoming less and less interesting and unique. SOCOM was a product of its time, its environment. It was great for the people who only had a PlayStation 2, who brought friends to play online, and formed communities around it. For outsiders who never had any attachment to it, the series is unfortunately unremarkable and forgettable. While SOCOM is probably never coming back through official means, the series has a loyal fanbase that has kept the flame ignited long after the fall of Zipper, with private servers and remakes on mods for other games. Even if forgotten by most, SOCOM will always remain a landmark game series on the legacy of the PlayStation 2. If you liked the video, please like and subscribe, and thanks for watching, and I'll see you in the next one.